I'd like to do a roll call. Mark Barlow?
Here.
Lauren?
Yes.
Brian? Gina? Brian? Liz?
Here.
Kyle?
Here.
Ann?
Yes.
Susan Marie?
Here.
David?
Yeah.
Kat? Stephanie?
Here.
Miriam, I think, is out. And do we have any of the student representatives here? I do not see them. Just pass that around for signature, please. Thank you. Moving on to number 2, we have the approval of the agenda. Do I have an approval? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second? I have a discussion. So be it.
Who's second?
Sorry. Commissioner Clayman, seconded. I apologize. I've got to slow things down. She keeps missing who's approving and seconding things. I'm sorry. All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Thank you. This time, I'd like to welcome any comments and questions from the public, including staff and students. We encourage you to express your opinions on matters concerning any subject relating to public education in general and the operations of the Burlington School District in particular. The board is very interested in the opinions expressed during this public comment period. However, this is not a time to engage members of the board in conversation or debate. Do we have anybody from the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close public debate. Thank you. Public comment. Thank you. Moving on to the board report, we
Only do board reflections if there's public comment.
That's correct. This time, we're going to move on to the board report. There's nothing contained within the board report. We align things so that they be more lined up with the superintendent's report. So moving on to the superintendent's report, Dr. Smith?
Okay, we'll begin with an update on some of the student-centered learning work that supported by the Partnership for Change, and we've got Hal Colston here on behalf of the partnership to do a little presentation for the board. So I'll turn it over to you, Hal.
Thank you, Howard. Do I need a microphone?
Yes.
Great. My name's Hal Colston. I'm the director of the Partnership for Change. And I'm going to share with you a brief PowerPoint. And for new board members, this will hopefully get you up to speed about the work that we've embarked on. And for returning board members, maybe some refresher about how we got started, our structure, and where we're headed with the work. After a successful planning grant, the Partnership for Change was created by the districts of Winooski and Burlington, and we were awarded a 3.5-year, $3.75 million grant from the Nellie Mae Education Foundation in January 2012. This grant is administered by the Burlington School District Central Office, and it was designed to support district-level systems change so that the Winooski Middle High School and Burlington High School would shift into student-centered, proficiency-based learning systems. So to best prepare our young people to successfully meet the challenges and opportunities in the 21st century, the Partnership for Change is the innovator, the communicator, and the bridge that engages the community and the school districts of Winooski and Burlington to remodel the high schools so that all of its students graduate and can demonstrate their proficiency in critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, and be contributing citizens in our communities, whether they pursue college or career. So we like to think of the work as remodeling, as we build on what's working and introduce new practices and strategies that demonstrate achieving a student-centered, proficiency-based learning system. And in this process, we created graduate expectations in both districts that included input from about 1,000 community members. And this work was really foundational for creating new pathways to support student-centered learning. And the proficiencies will be aligned with the graduate expectations. The partnership is based on 3 principles. Equity, with the belief that all students get the support they need in their learning community. Engagement, where all have a voice and a place at the table to create a new learning community. And one-to-one technology, so that this is a tool for expanding a student's personal learning. These 3 principles were established by both communities in the fall of 2011. So the work of the partnership is manyfold, and it feels different to each and every stakeholder. At the end of the day, we're all here to support our students and our community in this change effort. And when I tell people that I work for the Partnership for Change, I usually experience a similar response like, oh yeah, the partnership, I've heard of that. You guys are busy with getting technology to the students. Or the group that's working on internship for kids. Or the group that supported the year-end studies program at Burlington High School. So these are just a few of the examples of the different work that we've been working on over the years and to get us towards our goal. In the first 2 years, we had a model that featured fellows. We had 5 fellows who were essentially teachers or community partners that we would buy out their contract for half-time or full-time to engage in the work of the partnership. And we had 5 themes that arose out of that initial community meeting. And there were 5 themes that were identified to become the levers of change for this work. And they are personalized proficiency-based learning, community-based learning, teaching and learning environment, youth engagement and leadership, and family-school partnership. So each of the fellows had a focus on one of these themes for the first 2 years. So in each of those 5 focus areas, there was an implementation team that was created to engage collaborative learning, experimentation, and research to support the reshaping of our schools. Led by 2 co-chairs and a partnership fellow, the implementation teams provided an opportunity for educators, youth, families, business leaders, community partners to participate and to learn about the school change work and the process, and to collaborate to move the work forward. In our 3rd year, we began to shift. What we were hearing from a lot of the teachers was that they didn't have the time to really wrap their heads around this work. And in order to accommodate that, we abandoned the fellowship model and really focused on trying to become the partnership with a lowercase p, so that each of the districts would step up and own the work. So after hearing from teachers and learning that they needed more time, what we created was a partner-teacher program. And this was able to include, in the first year, 12 teachers from Burlington High School, and now in our 2nd year, we have 10 teachers who are working in 2-person teams. They have 20% of their time available so that they can plan together their curriculum and how they're going to shift to a student-centered, proficiency-based learning system. And this cohort of teachers now in the 2nd year are sharing their work together, are sharing it out with their colleagues, and are kind of getting us to this place, not unlike where medicine was in the early 1900s, where training became really organized and helping physicians understand the whole notion of practicing medicine. So you're always building on what you've learned and improving it, and we're taking that same approach for the teachers. An important partner in our work is Parents and Youth for Change. They are an entity that's part of Voices for Vermont Children, and they also are funded by Nellie Mae. And we work together. They use a community organizing model to engage the community, to engage those voices that aren't normally at the table, families that are marginalized, families that education has not really worked well for. And this is an example of the first public action meeting that took place in Burlington in the fall of 2012. And here we see administrators from the Burlington School District who responded to action research that parents and youth who were supported by Parents and Youth for Change, who really wanted to figure out a more equitable education experience for their children. And out of this came a parent-friendly report card that was color-coded and that could help parents really understand what a B in a ELL course meant as compared to a B in an honors course. In June 2014, a second public action meeting was held, and out of that work, about 6 months of action research, the parents and youth presented their findings, and what they wanted to see in place was a meaningful and effective advisory system at Burlington High School. So last summer, Amy Mellencamp and myself took up the task to make this happen, and we began a year-long process to design and implement an advisory system for Burlington High School, which will be launched this fall, next month. And this steering committee structure was created out of the planning grant phase. It's a 35-member, multi-stakeholder group from folks in the community who are coming from parents, business partners, educators, and who really are the keepers of the vision for the work, and working through individual and collective actions to make this vision a reality, and celebrating our successes, and actually acting as lead communicators of the work, as liaisons into the community, sharing what we're doing and hearing from folks what their concerns or hopes are for in this transformation work. The partnership was refunded for another 3 years of funding at a level of $1.5 million. After these coming 3 years, we fade away into the sunset with the plan to have both districts really step up to own the work. This grant will be awarded year to year as we are able to demonstrate systemic change and shift in the work that supports student-centered and proficiency-based learning. So that's my presentation, and open for any questions, comments you may have.
Commissioner Dotson.
Thank you, Chairman Porter. So I just want to understand, Hal, so you said that the money was re-upped for 3 more years, 1.5, then you said it goes off to sunset. So there's no opportunity for an additional, for future.
Correct.
1.5, that's it, that's the end. And so just back to the dynamics, and I'm wondering if you sort of see anything that has emerged or evolved versus the understanding I'm going to describe here. So an example of something that seems similar in Lawrence, Mass, they had a great deal of school reform. Now, in Lawrence, Mass, it was due to much more urgency as related to the performance of the schools. But there were actually mandates, state mandates, but then once that mandate was happened, locally, teachers, union, administrators, and third-party partners could then come together to decide how they were going to do work, that there was a commitment, we have to do the work. Our thing's a little different. My understanding is, at least in the case of Burlington, there are teachers now who can opt out and aren't terribly involved in the work. Some are very involved. I know the 9th grade team's very involved, but there's not really any accountability to have to do the work that the partnership is promoting. And it could happen that in 3 more years, the money could go away and there could be a place where there still is an implementation and buy-in to the ideas. Is that a reasonable sort of understanding of things?
Well, I think there's been a shift just this past June. Each year, the partnership has supported the Summer Development Institute, where teachers come together for a week from both districts. And this year, Amy mandated that proficiencies need to be tried out in the classroom this year in some shape or form. Now, the
Whole staff?
Yes.
Okay.
So this cohort of partner teachers are kind of leading the way because, you know, they are the ones who applied and wanted to be part of this effort. And so that, you know, there's going to be some leadership, I think, from within of how do you do this? You know, what does a rubric look like? How do I get proficiencies into my chemistry class? So that is ongoing work. And what I envision is that this partner teacher model can be sustained. You're not talking about a ton of money. And you're giving teachers almost like a mini sabbatical every 5 years to step back and to work together and to rethink about how they can really improve their practice to become more student-centered. So I think there's a real shift in how we're going to, you know, see more people stepping up because this is what's expected.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Curry?
Thank you for that presentation, Hal. It was nice to be reminded of how everything started, and I got a real sense of some of the benchmarks that you hit each year. Can you give us a understanding of what the benchmarks are that are coming in the next year, second year, third year, and you know
Right.
what we should expect to look for?
We've been working with Education Development Center for the last 4 years of the grant. They're contracted by Nellie Mae to collect data. They do that in teacher questionnaires, student questionnaires, interviews, observations in the classroom. And what they have noted in their most recent report is that they have seen a strong sense of collaboration amongst educators trying to get towards student-centered learning. And they've seen some signs of stronger student engagement, most recently with our implementation of the partner-teacher model. So we continue to work with them, and we will throughout the entire life of the grant. And we've also have finally come up with some baseline indicators through the staff at the central office and also a data manager in Winooski. And I just reached out to Barry Grusner today to see if they've had anything of substance that I could share with you tonight. They're still pulling that together, but we will be able to see going forward indicators that are showing us getting to these goals.
Commissioner Suino?
Thanks, Hal. Can you give us an example of what some of the indicators might be? So have you, for example, you're saying that the funding is renewed every year, so within a year, have you identified with Nellie Mae what kind of benchmarks there are? But I'm also very interested in the indicators, if you could give just some examples for us.
I think student engagement is definitely an indicator. We've seen an increase in that in this past year with the partner-teacher model. Aligning professional development to support student-centered learning. There has been a definite alignment of how development is really, professional development is delivered. Before it was kind of here and there, but now it's all focused on how do we get to the student-centered learning model. So those are a couple examples, and I think what some of the data is showing that teachers want more professional development in order to do this work. So that's something that we haven't really clearly identified before, but that collaborative sense of teachers now realizing we need to work together in order to make this happen, I think is a significant shift.
So just to clarify, so what goals do you have for this particular year for funding to happen at the end of the year?
We're looking to really make more impact into systemic shifts. I think we've done really well over the last few years with programmatic shifts and doing that rather well. but in order for this to really be sustained, Nellie Mae really wants to see how that can lead to systemic shift. For instance, the partner teacher model, even though it's a program approach, clearly changes the culture in the high school with teachers having space and time to really improve their teaching practice. So I see that evolving into a systemic shift. I think we're looking at how do we really bring equity in a clear, more visible way to some of the students who have historically struggled. I think that embodies a systemic shift in terms of, because at the end of the day, if we can't really accomplish the notion of equity, this work is pretty much for naught. So, so we're really looking at models like restorative justice that we've identified in a couple of other Nellie Mae grantees, this site council model, which is a governance structure in the high school, which gives real importance to student voice. We've seen a couple of models, the most robust at Hanover High School in Hanover, New Hampshire. It's been around for 25 years. It's a body of maybe 40 people, half of them are students, and they literally lead and make decisions about what happens in the school building that's not covered by board policy or state policy. So student voice through those kinds of activities, I think, is going to lead us to a systemic shift.
Thank you. Commissioner Judson and Commissioner Harrington, then we'll have to call this and move on.
I think this is well, first of all, thanks a lot.
Sure.
A little bit of a follow-up to Stephanie's questions. As an instructor for graduate courses at St. Michael's, I did some of this work. It took me probably 5 years to get comfortable with it. And so I'm curious what you mean by, how would you define a mini sabbatical every 5 years?
Well, if we look at 90 so plus teachers at Burlington High School, and if we could get a cohort of 10 to 12 to 15 of them a year to work in this way, to have time, 20% of their time available to do this work, in some ways that's like a mini sabbatical.
Okay, so
Every 5 years, teachers can roll through a model like that and have a chance to really contribute to growth.
I see. So the assumption is after 3 years of the grant that the Burlington schools would be able to support 5 teachers half-time every so often.
That would be
Necessary, critical, right,
absolutely,
in order to really make it work. Okay, thank you.
yes.
Thank you very much. That was really informative and useful to me as a new board member.
Sure.
I also have a slight follow-up on Stephanie's. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how student engagement is either defined or recognized in the assessment that you've done so far.
Sure. It's reported out through the online questionnaires that students take, and there are a number of questions that they engage with that really indicate whether or not they're more engaged or less engaged. And then looking at the historical data, it's been collected over the last 3 years, we definitely have seen a shift in more engagement of students. So that's how we're measuring that.
Attendance also? Maybe attendance?
Attendance is in there, one of maybe 4 or 5 indicator questions.
Thank you, Hal.
Sure, thank you.
Very much. Howard?
Okay. Thanks, Al. I just want to use this opportunity to thank Hal and his colleague Lindsay for their key leadership in this work. It does not happen by itself, and as they know full well, without some gentle prodding from people who make it their mission for things to move forward, it wouldn't have been progressing in the way that Hal described. So I think we're in a good place. Now we clearly have some accountability for demonstrating progress going forward in order to continue to qualify for the funding that's been allocated, and that's something that the whole district has to recognize. It's not going to just flow automatically, but we're accountable for things we should be doing anyhow, and I think that's important to remind people. This is not just some externally imposed, grant by some benevolent group from the outside that, wants us to do certain things. These are things that we need to be doing. They're research-based, they're student-centered, and very much aligned with, I think, the direction the district would want to be going anyhow. And this, I think, has some potential already realized and yet to be realized to move all that work forward.
And
Thanks.
what's coming around is an explainer document which summarizes our work. So thank you.
So next topic. I almost got through my term of service without getting into a sports issue. And this is an issue that came up recently. We were approached by the sports boosters, who, like sports boosters everywhere, are enthusiastic group who volunteer a lot of hours to try to raise funds to help support school programs. And they were careful, by the way, to emphasize that they, even though they are called sports boosters, they really support all kinds of after-school programs, not just sports. And they have been looking at what other districts have been doing in the whole area of using school facilities to allow for business sponsorship, essentially ads, which can be sold as a way of raising additional funds to support the work that they do. And they approached the district about using our high school field, our athletics field fence as a place to allow banners to be posted that are essentially, represent slots that are sold for businesses who want to sponsor our after-school programs. The banners would be uniform, and they would be, at this point, their intent would be to have them actually be like a blue and white type banner, but in the interior portion of it would then be a logo or something identifying the business that would sponsor it. As I mentioned in some notes to the board, this is an area that has can certainly generate controversy. You can have long and lengthy conversations about this. There are very legitimate questions around the use of public facilities for such purposes, philosophical, practical, legal, all kinds of potential issues. It is being done in the region and by the accounts that we have, in a manner that has been seems to have met community standards and be considered to be a successful model. The approach that they're proposing is actually based on talking with other sports boosters group and understanding what works and what doesn't. So, for example, the proposal to have it be uniform banners as opposed to a mishmash of whatever businesses happen to propose, want to hang themselves is something that came out of that, so that there's you reserve some control over it. Their proposal also is to own the responsibility of both soliciting the ads and using good judgment in terms of the kinds of businesses that would be appropriate to have representative sponsors of school programs, so that Joe's Bar, for example, would not be considered one such appropriate. I hope there isn't a Joe's Bar in Burlington. There's not meant to cast aspersions. But it's you get the idea. There needs to be some judgment, and obviously, that is a consideration. What I'm proposing, first of all, as a reminder, this is not an area that's addressed specifically in school district policy. In terms of using facilities for advertising purposes, the only potentially relevant policy that the board has to do with access to school facilities, and that is at the discretion of the superintendent. That said, the halls of administration buildings are littered with the bodies of superintendents who attempted to get too far out ahead of the board or community, get all heady with the power that they might have under these circumstances without at least bringing it to the board for some discussion. When all is said and done, it seemed to me what made the most sense here is we've got a group that did their homework. I think we're at a point in time, past, frankly, the point in time where we can just continue to rely on the solution for every potential need that we have is just to add it to the school budget and raise taxes accordingly. We've got a group that's willing to look at leveraging other sources of revenue. I think increasingly that's something that the district is going to want to do, is to look for alternative sources of revenue in order to support all the things we want to do. And they're prepared to take this on. So with that in mind, what I'm recommending that what I would be prepared to do is approve on a trial basis for the coming school year that we allow the sports boosters to go ahead and implement this program, with the understanding that in the course of the fall season, for example, they would be expected to work with the district to develop some guidelines and procedures that would be appropriate to this kind of activity, and that they would have to make a report, to the board at the end of the fall season, so the board would have an opportunity to, at that point, you would know if there are any public concerns that have been raised. We would have that as a context for looking at at this approach and its success, as well as any sort of practical issues around it. They would be able to report on just how much money was raised and what kinds of purposes the money was used for. So the board could begin to get a sense in terms of going forward whether this is something that the district wants to support indefinitely, as opposed to on just a one-year trial basis. But it's one of those things that I think you can spend a lot of time trying to anticipate what all the issues are. Experience in other communities, you can pretty much guess what some of the questions might be. But by the same token, I think sometimes you just don't know until you try it. And if you look at sort of risk-reward, the risk is there. People who raise questions about the appropriateness of it, which certainly the district would be willing to take into consideration as far as contemplating the merits of going forward, and the reward is there's extra money to support extra opportunities for students in all of the after-school programs in an area where they tend to get people coming to them looking for more funding than they can provide. So that's my recommendation, and I wanted to just open it up for any board comment or suggestions.
Commissioner Chena.
If I could just take a minute to read 3 concerns I have about this, and I'm not necessarily objecting to it, but I feel like it's my duty to share these concerns with the board and the community. And I have them in an email, so I'm just going to read you the email. So my first concern is, if the district picks and chooses what is or is not appropriate, then we are ultimately discriminating against some advertisers. Why is a bank okay, but a head shop or the military is not okay? There could be ethical issues about any potential advertiser, and I don't feel comfortable with any specific staff person or group just making judgments based on their opinions. If we have to include one person in advertising, don't we have to include all? What standards would we be using to determine appropriateness?
Is that all part of the first one, or have you moved on? Okay.
This is the first one. Is this judgment essentially an endorsement of a particular product, service, or business, et cetera? So that was my first concern. The second one is that school space is sacred. If we start selling pieces of it to the highest bidder, where will this take us? We have been entrusted with the cultivation of the minds, bodies, and spirits of the next generation. If we allow any kind of outside advertising, then we are letting people purchase the opportunity to influence our children's choices and development. This is a major problem for me. As far as I am concerned, our community's children and our collective future are not for sale to the highest bidder. There are not many places left in our society that are free from advertising and corporate influence. Our schools should remain a neutral space. And my third concern is that there does seem to be a lack of policy about this. And if so, it's our responsibility to clarify that. I'm not comfortable with passing the buck to the superintendent or to a staff person or to a group of volunteers, even though I appreciate their work and their intention. We are elected leaders, and it's our responsibility to manage or create a policy around this issue. So at this point, and then at that point, the staff or whoever is designated can interpret or enforce that policy. So I think that we should talk more about what our policy is about advertising if it's unclear. So those are my concerns. I'm not objecting per se, but I have concerns. Thanks.
Anyone else? I'll speak up here just for a second, if you don't mind. I don't have a problem turning this over to the district, to tell you the truth, because I think there's a point where the board just can't do everything. I mean, if they were going to allow, if they were going to say we can't have dogs on the playing field during non-school hours, would we care about what kind of dog is it? Do we want to get involved in that, or do we want to, is there a point where we have to throw the trust back to the district that certainly has been wounded over the last year or so, and say that we trust your judgment on some of these things, that we're not pros on this either. So on my side of this, and I really did think hard on this, Brian, and considered many of your concerns. But in this case, I feel quite comfortable allowing them to try it on a trial basis to where we can revisit this again, and we can say, okay, this was something that shouldn't have been done, but at least we tried. When it comes down to revenue, we're not too easily saying no just because it's different. Oh, that's all I had to say. Anybody else? Commissioner Seguino.
I'd like to ask a question. I'll comment later. What's the anticipated revenue from this endeavor, let's say, for the fall semester? Has there been a target that's been discussed?
They didn't provide an estimate. You could guess the potential based on the linear footage of the fence and the number of banners, the size of the banners. They have a scale, for example, so it also depends on their different levels of sponsorship as well. So, it's going to be a range. They're talking about, the minimum level of sponsorship for a single banner at the lowest level would be $500, and the maximum level would be $1,000.
Well, can I ask a follow-up question? So these banners would be displayed only during the athletic events and would be removed for the rest of the school week?
No.
So they would be there permanently for all of the
Yes.
athletic activities that are not related to the boosters? So the advertising would continue 24/7?
That's my understanding.
Commissioner Kleeman.
I share some of Commissioner China's concerns about particularly the definition of what's appropriate. I think we're opening up a huge can of words, to be cliche about it, can of worms, because
Can of words, too.
it is a can of words, yeah. Because, is Joe's Bar okay, but Joe's Pub and Grill, which is more of a restaurant that has a bar, I think it's just going to be insane, honestly. I'm also concerned about if $500 to $1,000 per slot is worth the hassle of figuring all that out. It's a chunk of money for sure. And if it's enough, if it's a significant enough chunk of money, why aren't we considering using this advertising space for things beyond extracurricular activities and sports? I'm still frustrated with a lot of the cuts we made last year, and it seems like we should take every opportunity to use additional funding to bring back kindergarten paras or things of that nature. And my other comment, I'm not completely against this, incidentally. My other comment is it seems, aside from the fact that it's year-round and that there should be a way to get even more money out of that if it's a continual advertisement, it seems to be related to the idea of selling ads in a playbill during a theater program. Particularly if we're looking at locally owned and local businesses, there seems to be a little bit of a fit there. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
By the way, that's a very good point, and I'm not familiar with, but is that done here? Because
Yes.
it's common, but I wasn't sure if it was done here. So that's an interesting comparison.
At the high school also, they do it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Kurt.
I would just like to say, I think that we should leave it in the hands of our school leaders to make what is appropriate for the students if we do go forward with this. And the pricing is comparable to what University of Vermont and other hockey rinks charge for their board ads and things like that. It's the same kind of money. This is done at hockey rinks. It's done at Letty Park, where we hold all our hockey games. It's done at University of Vermont, where hockey games are held. It's done at Carnes. It's done everywhere other high school style student activities are and other places where high school student activities are held, like hockey games. They don't whitewash the boards at Letty Park, and they don't whitewash them at Carnes when the high school and junior high school and students are in there doing it. So I think we can hope that we've hired a superintendent or a team that is going to make sure that this is appropriate. I mean, otherwise, then maybe the board should step in. But I mean, give it a year and see how it works.
Commissioner Barlow.
I just want to say I am for this. I think we have to start thinking outside the box on how we generate revenues. I appreciate Brian and Kat's concerns, and I do think that there are questions there. One question I have, you had mentioned Joe's Bar, it wouldn't be an appropriate advertiser. Is there a list or a standard right now, or is that just thought to be one that wouldn't pass muster?
No, I gave that by way of an illustration when we talk about, for example, alcohol and something that is, we don't serve alcohol on school property and that sort of thing. So that sort of, was used as an example. There isn't a list, and it would be difficult to probably to generate one. I think there's, again, the understanding is that there is this one of those things which is obviously in short supply in many cases, so we tend to be cynical, but common sense, I think, is essentially part of what, frankly, is being proposed as a guideline for the judgment call on the part of the sports boosters who would be doing this, not the school district. And for what it's worth, and I don't think we should be playing games with it because they're still, representing the school district, but it is the school district per se is somewhat at arm's length in terms of the school district is not knocking on the doors of business. These are private citizens, parents who are knocking on the doors of business, in a volunteer way to raise funds, for students. The other thing I just want to mention, in response to sort of the school and the infiltration of advertising the school, I would also argue that now, with every kid having access to a computer and anybody can do a Google search on a computer in school, and you get on the site and ads pop up. So they're here now, and they're here uninvited and unfiltered and all the time, every day. So it is a little bit different environment than the environment when this issue has been considered in the past sort of pre-electronic age.
And one last comment is that I haven't seen the iPads that Verizon's providing for the Digital Promise Grant, but I would expect that they would use that as an opportunity to put their corporate logo into the classrooms. And I don't know if that is or isn't happening, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were.
Commissioner Dotson.
Just quickly, like Mark, I also, as is often the case, I was compelled by Brian's concerns. I think these are real concerns, but personal opinion, the train has left the station. The school is sacred space. I like that idea. But I think maybe, school is kind of productive space or a different way. So I guess what I'm saying is that, to me, it's clear that additional revenue outside of the tax base is required for all schooling. We can see what's happening locally and nationally. And the schools that function best now don't so much keep these forces out as have leadership and vision that harnesses them and has a real clear idea about setting up these boundaries and parameters that people talk about, and then channeling those forces, in this case, external money that comes with strings, to do the best work. Most of the money comes with strings. Nellie Mae's money comes with strings. Gates has an agenda, and all these agendas aren't necessarily what the local school district has first, but the savvy practitioners figure out how to manage these various entities that are now entering the sacred space and use them to the purposes that are decided upon there in the community.
Thank you. Commissioner Bears-Bischoff.
Good work.
Yeah, that was good. I've been practicing.
I was just thinking, I wonder if there's any way, I share all of Brian's concerns, and I also understand the practical need for this. I wonder if we did it, Howard, as you said, tentatively for a year as an experiment, if there's a way to kind of schedule a real conversation with each other and the district leaders, the superintendent, and maybe even do some polling of students about their feelings about it to see how it went. How much did it produce, and how do people feel about it once they've seen it, and then maybe make a policy about it, make an actual policy. And the other thing I wanted to say was that it seems like it wouldn't be too hard to just say there shouldn't be advertising for anything that would be illegal for teenagers to do. That would probably be a wise place to start.
Thank you. Commissioner Judson, please.
This isn't a facetious question. I'm really curious. Are there soda machines in the high school? Yes. No. So they. Pardon?
There's vending machines that sell milk, water, soda, other things.
Right. So I'm sure the machines have images that advertise issues. I've always been against advertising in schools. But as Carla said, the train has left the station. We need to look at things differently. I trust the parents and the staff to make good decisions on who they're going to choose. And if, Bob's Smoke Shop shows up, then we can say something about it. And I like the idea of having it on a temporary basis.
Mr. Squino, we're just going to finish up with you, and then we're going to go ahead and we'll just take this.
First of all, I want to acknowledge that the funding challenges, and I think a topic that we've discussed a great deal here is the role of athletics in improving student well-being. So I want to just put that on the table as something that I think that we all agree with. I do think it's a struggle to resist easy sources of money to supplement what we cannot seem to achieve through our tax system. That said, I think that the fundamental challenge is the following, that markets operate on the basis of self-interest. So selling advertising is about making profits and what the corporation gets out of selling advertising to the school district. Public education is different, and I think we have a real commitment to engender the support for public education that our children deserve. And what that means is I think that we need to appeal to people who would be willing to fund athletics, not on the basis of self-interest, but on their willingness to invest in public education. Corporations do support a wide variety of programs in terms of parent programs, in terms of math and science labs, and so on and so forth, as an investment in education. And for many, that is the advertisement that they get, that they are good citizens. So I would suggest that, I'd like to suggest that we don't do this now, that we ask the boosters to seek alternative mechanisms to generate income. So Howard, that was my question, was how much is anticipated to raise? Are they anticipating to raise, and can that be achieved through, for example, students who talk about the benefit of athletics to them? And can we have a wider conversation that actually builds the public support for our school system that we very much need? I'm afraid that if we go down the path of advertising, then it simply becomes one of self-interest, and we haven't really done what I think is our job as a school district to do, which is to help generate the compassion and interest in the community to support education.
Thank you. Do you have a motion?
It's not a board action item, unless the board spontaneously does it.
Okay.
Liz has been wanting, she hasn't.
Liz, you'll be the last one. Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond to something someone else commented on about scheduling a real conversation, polling the students, evaluating the pilot, and then make a policy. Just so people know, this came to the policy committee first, and because there was no policy, it fell into the procedural approach where, in the absence of a policy, the superintendent makes a recommendation about what should happen. So just administratively, we are following procedures. Philosophically, I completely agree that this is one of those hold your nose things because it stinks. Pragmatically, I'm supportive because of the way education is funded through a mechanism that squeezes mostly the middle class. And, if we end up in a situation where we're being pressured to support a budget with a less than a 2% increase. I don't see a sustainable way to enhance the activities that are not required by the state statute to provide, like athletics and co-curricular, other than resorting to something that's already in the fabric of our society, because our society doesn't want to pay taxes for its public institutions. And when you live in a society that doesn't want to pay taxes, you know, that has a different value system around revenue raising, this is what we end up with. So we can't have it both ways. I've also been involved in a cooperative school and on PTOs, and I know what it's like to work a full-time job and come home and write requests for philanthropic donations. It's very hard, it's not sustainable, it's very difficult to get people to commit to that, and I think from my experience with PTOs and the Booster Club, people are just burnt out because everybody's asking for philanthropic donations, and it's a lot of work, and it's harder than asking for ads where you give donor recognition. So I hate doing this. I think it's a really terrible way to fund education, but I think it's a real comment on our society and our, you know, the way we do things. And I won't be comfortable with it, but I'm not gonna oppose it because our kids deserve a good, strong athletic program, and that's what the Boosters Club have in mind. They have the kids' interests at heart because we need a stronger athletic program and we need a stronger co-curricular program. We need something that's accessible and more equitable for everybody. And the more money we have, the more that's going to happen. And clearly the voters have spoken. They're not going to pay for it with their tax dollars.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and close discussion on this now. And we're going to move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
You get them?
No. Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Lauren.
Thank you.
Very good. All those in favor of the consent, I'm sorry, discussion on the consent agenda? None? All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Thank you. Motion carries. Just be patient with me, please, while I scroll up here. We are going to move on to item 7, the committee, starting with the committee reports, and the first one up is the curriculum committee report.
Excellent.
Mr. Dodson.
Thank you, Chairman Porter. So the curriculum committee meets just prior to this meeting. And so first I'll update folks on what we've been up to, and then I'll just review the goals. So we've been doing two things primarily over the course of the summer, is working with the Director Phillips and Director McNamara in sort of just hearing back from them and giving a little back and forth about their plans for this year coming up in terms of special services and curriculum instruction. And so we continued that process this evening with them reporting out based on conversations over the summer and with the retreat, the board retreat, and their plans for the school year, which feed into the goals. So I'll come back to that. But the other big topic has been a discussion of possible ways of creating some additional support for kindergarten classrooms. There was elimination of power positions last year due to budgetary constraints, and there's been some concern within the district, but certainly also concern in the community with parents about how to provide a higher level of support than just one teacher in the classroom with approximately 20 students. And so we brainstormed, we came up with some ideas, and we've been pursuing those ideas out in the community, where some of the ideas looking for supplemental support, and then a big part of it is thinking creatively about how to deploy the resources within the district. So that's where we've left things right now. It would appear that most of the external supplemental resource we might find in the community would come at cost. And since our budget's already set, we were clear that we would try to avoid looking at options that cost additional dollars because of all the difficulty of figuring out where those dollars come from. So the next step is to have Superintendent Smith and Directors McNamara and Phillips work with principals and work with BEA and all sort of parties that, and work with teachers most importantly, on thinking about how we deploy para educators that we have there, who sometimes are, not sometimes, definitely are often assigned to a student in the classroom, but with creativity, there's a lot of opportunity to use that extra professional in the classroom to provide support to all students, so really trying to ramp that up. And then there was, in the budget, because of the elimination of paras, there were some interventionists, literacy and math interventionist positions, so work to make sure those are being optimized. And then there are also guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists who are available to provide support. So it's really creating that network. What's that sort of infrastructure look like? So those are going to be happening. Stay tuned. The next step is all of the professional development and pre-planning that all those professionals will do. And then in our September meeting, we'll discuss how school year got started off and what was ultimately put together in terms of deploying those resources. And then, so the goals for 2015-2016, there are 3 bullets. One is looking at teacher supervision and evaluation, to adopt the differentiated supervision and evaluation model inclusive of formative and summative feedback. This is a problem throughout pre-K to 12 education. Howard, as a long-time professional, would know better than me, but it's epidemic that there's not often very good systems. It's often a rote, kind of go through the motions one time a year, checklist kind of thing, and a district having actually put together a really deep process that honors and respects professionals and gives the kind of attention and time necessary is uncommon. And so I think it's really important and very thoughtful that we're sort of committed to that and are going to work on putting together a system that just works better for all parties involved and really has the kind of support and accountability that should be there. So that's one. Second one is was part of the earlier discussion, K-5 math and literacy interventionists, to work with that whole network that I mentioned before to figure out how to optimize those positions. Is the second piece of work. And then the third piece of work is student support services, to develop a clearly articulated, coherent, evidence-based approach to delivering student support services across the tiers. Just quickly, this is editorial, but it might help people. Oftentimes, it's another place where I think it's epidemic. There's a system where there's 2 tracks. A student presents challenges, and then we decide they have special needs, and we try to move them in the IEP 504 range, and then there's everyone else. And really, what I think we're learning more and more is that students exist all along a continuum that are sort of manifesting things in many ways, and that a district putting itself in a position to have the professional training to meet those students along that continuum, to have early ability to early identification and be able to apply in a surgical way the kind of supports a student needs is really important. So I think that's what Dylan's moving towards is that sense of, and that actually plays in with the personalized learning plans. You know, it's mandated that this happen really. And so what does each student need, and what resources do we have to apply that to the best of our ability? Please.
My question for you is the use of the K-5 interventionists concentrating towards K through 2.
Correct.
Is there a downfall there that we're going to miss, and is it because we're so short-staffed that, you know, all grades 3, 4, and 5 not going to realize the need, or are we open? Is there a risk there if we move them to the concentration of K through 2?
That's an interesting question, Mark, and it actually feeds back in the conversation you and I have had over the last couple of years that one thing is a transition period, but the theory is, and there are some wonderful examples out there, that if you're able to actually set this up and do it well, then it creates a situation where you really minimize the degree of special attention and needed at 3 to 5 if you do the K to 2 work well, right? So you really intervened. You had a full sort of all hands on deck approach. You will find schools where you get to 4th or 5th grade and you know it's really you know a hand count of students who aren't functioning at grade level. and the behaviors really come down, and the work was done up front, and you really set yourself up. It doesn't eliminate it, but it's the right thing to do, and you find that those places do concentrate resources disproportionately at the lower level, and then the classroom teacher, which ideally the classroom teacher can handle most of what comes his or her way. And I think this sort of work done well creates a situation where that becomes a sustainable way of that school functioning.
Thank you. Other feedback? Commissioner Kurt.
I actually have a question for you, Kyle. I don't know if you
Sure.
can answer. I noticed we talk a lot about paras, and we've cut them and so on and so forth, and how important they are in the classroom. Do you know how long we've been using paras pre the cut last year? I mean, has it only been a couple of years? Has it been 5? Do you know the answer to that question in Burlington?
Special
I-
parents or?
No, general paras.
General Paris, right, General Paris. I do not have the answer to that question.
The only thing I'm aware of is relative specifically to their use in kindergarten. My understanding was that it's been off and on, but most recently was only in place for 2 years before this past year when they were reduced.
That's fair. Thank you.
Commissioner Curry.
Yeah, I was aware that they were increased to, the number was 16 in fiscal year 13 when I joined the board.
Which would have translated to, right, one per class at that time.
Right. So that was an increase. There were some before. I don't know how many.
Thank you. Any further feedback for Commissioner Dodson on the committee goals? Commissioner Dodson.
Just one thing, Commissioner Porter, that I think is important in terms of update is that we continue to be in conversation in committee that I think is relevant to all of you about just what it is that our role is. So as we come up with this conversation, the goals, how we function in the meeting, what we should accomplish in the meeting, what things should be taking place outside of the meeting, particularly as it relates to our work as the board. So right now, a lot of the work is being performed by directors Phillips and McNamara. They're telling us what they're doing, they're reporting back to us, and our new members have been really thoughtful about asking questions. What exactly is it that we're doing that's value added, that warrants us having these meetings? So we continue to do that. We're going to meet as a committee, and we certainly will be interacting with you, Chairman Porter, to understand what's happening amongst the committees and make sure that we have some consistency in terms of our understandings as a group of committees about how we function in a way that's aligned with the work of other committees. Yes.
We got 30 seconds. If there's any feedback regarding his goals.
It's the goals and the kindergarten paras. I don't know if
So
that's
just,
appropriate.
if you don't mind, just trying to stay with the
Really?
goals, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Oh, no, it's mostly the,
Take your 30 seconds. You're good. Go ahead.
okay. I'm just wondering if there's a plan for like the first month of kindergarten and trying to get a little additional support for the teachers, because I know that's kind of a really critical getting the kids in.
So absolutely. So all of that is very much focused on that. So in these conversations in these remaining weeks of August will be about, with principals, about what are your building resources and what is your plan for doing what you asked, saying that one of our most challenging transition and get the school year running is the kindergartners and how they get started. So how are you going to make sure that you're using social workers, psychologists, guidance counselors, paras, and these interventionists to maximize the successful transition?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Closing out the Curriculum Committee report. Moving on to number 8, Diversity and Equity Committee report. Commissioner Seguino.
Thank you. Most of our meeting last time was taken up with talking about goals for the coming year, and the goals were much influenced by the presentations at the first retreat and the ongoing work of the committee. So we have 4 goals. 2 are really exclusive to our committee, and 2 hopefully to work on with the curriculum committee. One of the goals of the district and of the board and the Diversity and Equity Committee has been to increase the representation of teachers of color in the school district. And so the first goal is to improve the effectiveness of recruitment and hiring procedures. The committee's role in that would be to review the district's revised hiring plan and the associated budget for that hiring plan, as well as developing a request for data to allow us to better monitor how the district is doing in terms of achieving this goal, and finally also to review changes in hiring policies. So that's the first goal. The second is to support district climate that fosters inclusion, equity, and peace to be achieved through a restorative justice framework. And so under this, you'll see there are a number of bullets that will help us as a committee support the district in doing this. I think central to this is some of the discussion again at the first retreat and more generally about issues around climate, and also about some of the movement towards changes in the way we approach behavioral management and regulation in the school district, away from a punishment model to one that really supports kids to regulate their behavior. So the district will be presenting a plan to the committee for implementing restorative justice, including a timeline and mechanisms for monitoring progress. So this goal really enshrines sort of the board's commitment to and approval of movement towards a restorative justice framework. And there are several other pieces of this. The review of the MOU with the police department, because that too would integrate some of the issues around climate as well as changes in the approach to so-called discipline. The committee would review the pre-K through 12 code of conduct revision that is ongoing, and continue to evaluate policies on ending out-of-school suspensions, and also to look at, continue to look at data on discipline, on suspensions, and also finally to look at the professional development needs that would help teachers be integrated into this different approach to discipline. So that's the second goal. So it has a number of pieces to it, but its overarching goal is to promote improvement in climate, which has been identified as an important issue. And finally, the last two goals are really to coordinate with the curriculum committee, one on ensuring that diversity and equity proficiency criteria are embedded in staff evaluations, and number two, to coordinate with the curriculum committee to evaluate the diversity and equity impact of the newly formed intervention teams.
Any questions? Commissioner Harrington.
I just want to first check that I think I just figured out that SRO is school resource officer, which is the same thing as the police officers who are in the schools? Okay. I have sort of two half comments. One, the notion of supporting teachers in terms of trauma-informed responses inside the curriculum came up in the discussion of that third goal that Kyle was talking about for curriculum committee. So I think that's another place where our committee work overlaps very profitably and productively. Secondly, I was wondering, what's the relationship between the district's diversity and equity plan and these particular goals? Did they exist in parallel? Is the diversity and equity plan also still guiding the district administrators?
Yes, yeah. Just by way of information, so every fall, the district reviews its strategic diversity plan with our committee. So I would say it's an iterative process. We communicate, and throughout the year, probably some of the committee's concerns are integrated into the district's strategic plan, but we also really take the lead from that plan.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Seguino, anything else? That's it. Thank you. We will close out the Diversity and Equity Committee report. Moving on to Policy and Governance report. Commissioner Curry.
Okay. So do I need to do all the motions first, or can I do the goals presentation
You can
first?
do the goals first. That'd be
Thank you
fine.
for taking liberty with the agenda. So to cover the goals, the Governance, Policy, and Advocacy Committee has embarked on these goals this year, researching a model for evaluating the superintendent. And committee members have done some great research, so we've made headway on that. We're looking for a model that would be both give us kind of a broad framework for the type of evaluation we'd like to do to set up a process, as well as a framework that would allow us to fill in some concrete benchmarks and a time frame in collaboration with the new superintendent, based on the work that we did at the retreats in July. Secondly, we'd like to take on policy governance research and educate ourselves first, and then bring that information about the policy governance model to the board over the course of the year. Hopefully do some trainings in that area. Third, we're looking at streamlining and consolidating existing policies to eliminate duplication. We already brought one to you at the July meeting. And then we will continue to respond to the needs for new policies or policy revisions as other committees raise them or community members raise them.
Thank you. Discussion of the governance and policy goals for the year. Thank you. Commissioner Curry?
Okay, item 9A. At the last meeting, we approved the first reading of the policy on student representation on the school board, acknowledging that it's a policy that is something people would like to see developed further and revised. And there was some volunteerism to take that on over the course of the year. But as reflected in the minutes, the board agreed generally to adopt the policy as it's written now, and because we have a live application from a student, and then people who volunteered to revise the policy can do that over the course of the year. So I'd like to make a motion to waive the requirement of 2 public meetings that would happen not less than a month apart for the second reading, and adopt the student representative on the school board policy.
I'll second.
Who seconded, I'm sorry? Commissioner Ball?
Mark.
Thank you. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion to waive the requirement of 2 public meetings not less than a month apart for second reading and adoption of policy F28, student representative on the school board, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? It's unanimous. Commissioner Curry?
Sorry, from the Department of Redundancy. I'd like to make a motion to approve the second reading and adopt policy F28, which is the student representative on the school board.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. We have a motion to approve the second reading and adopt policy F28, student representative on the school board. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against? Unanimous. Commissioner Curry?
Thank you. I was not at the July 28th policy committee, and Mark Barlow was chairing on my behalf, so I'll turn it over to him.
And so the next motion is I'll move to approve the first reading and waive the second reading and adopt policy F29R, prevention of harassment, hazing, and bullying of students.
Second.
Discussion. Commissioner Curry?
So first, I apologize for, well, I was not at the July 28th meeting, and so when I returned from vacation, I picked up on a couple things that led me to feel more comfortable with not waiving the second reading of this policy. There were actually a couple points that were made to me by a constituent about the statute upon which the Agency of Education based these model policies, having some more restrictive language than the model policies reflect, specifically in the areas of developing actual procedures for training, and secondly, for designating 2 people to receive complaints per school campus. So I would just appreciate another policy committee meeting in August to talk about those in more depth, hopefully with our attorney, and ask that people are willing to postpone the adoption of these policies until the September meeting, which would only be 2 weeks into the school year.
Okay. Any discussion? So Commissioner Curry, this would be considered the first reading?
Well, I guess if there's no other discussion, I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we waive the second reading from this motion.
You can't do that.
Oh.
That, once the discussion started, you can't make a friendly amendment. The motion's on the table to waive the second amendment. I construed your
That's okay,
comment
that's
as a
okay.
request to vote no.
Oh.
Commissioner Jetson?
What would be the reason, again, for postponing it?
Because the policies that the Agency of Education wrote are broad policies that are intended for all school districts. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all. And based on my kind of institutional memory of being on the school board in the Burlington School District, my feeling is that the statute has more restrictive language, and my feeling is that this district needs the more restrictive language. And the more restrictive language I'm referring to is that the statute actually, I can read it to people if they want, but the statute actually indicates that the training procedures should be described in the procedures that go with this policy, and that secondly, 2 people should be designated to receive complaints from each school campus, which would mean we'd have up to 18 people receiving complaints, which I'm not advocating for. I'm just saying that the current policy and procedures just kind of say the district should do something about having more than one reporter, but it's very broad and general. And my feeling is I'd like this district to have more specific, concrete language about training and receiving complaints.
So given the conversation's already started, I guess we need to,
No, we can vote. I think we can
Against?
take your advice to vote no
right.
to accept this and send it back to committee.
Yeah, I guess that's,
Well, right now, I
Yeah,
think
no,
you'd just
no,
be
the
voting
procedure.
yes or no, and then the conversation would be where do you go from here? I
This
would
would just be,
recommend a friendly no vote so that we can,
move on.
yes.
So I got a question. If we did that, then we could come back at the next meeting and waive the second reading and get,
all we're doing at this time is we are saying no to the first reading and motion to waive the second reading and adopt the policy. Okay? The motion reads as first reading and motion to waive second reading and adopt policy F29R, prevention of harassment, hazing, and bullying of students. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, nay.
Nay.
Unanimous, no.
Point of order. So can the motion maker make another motion that just approves the first reading? Or is it not acceptable because it's
Just
not
one
on the
second,
agenda?
just 1 second, please.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
I have a count, was there just something where there was a vote and there was a count, or not?
It was unanimous, no.
Oh, it was unanimous?
Yes.
Thank you.
Quietly.
So I just have a question related to that procedurally, in terms of how you do the first and second reading issue. I assume that, for example, the concept of having a first and second reading allows for the notion that some things would come up in the first reading that would be then addressed,
Exactly.
right? And prior to the second. So if there's a parliamentary way to do it, I would suggest having a motion now to accept what was presented as the first reading, and then it can go back to the policy committee, come back for the second reading.
Yeah, the policy on policies is very clear that things can change between the first and second reading.
Commissioner Curry, would you like to make a motion to approve this as a first reading?
make the motion and,
Just the first reading.
That's fine. We will.
okay. I move that we approve the first reading and adopt policy, or I move that we accept the first reading of policy F29R, prevention of harassment, hazing, and bullying of students.
I have a second motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against? It's unanimous ayes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Closing out the policy and governance portion of the committee report. I'm sorry, Commissioner Curry, was there anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Infrastructure and Technology Committee report. Commissioner Kirk.
Committee report pretty basic.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Our committee report's fairly basic. We are working on getting Edmonds done. We're trying to find a home for Horizons and On Top. And we're gearing up for long-range goals on assessing the school district's facilities and how we're going to long-range fund those. And that committee report is pretty much the same as our committee goals on how we're going to proceed. One thing that I have asked the ITC committee to look into is how we are evaluating the use of one-to-one and whether or not these are being used as expensive textbooks or if we actually are getting a value out of the money that we're spending on this product and the changing of those products again as we go forward.
Commissioner Curry.
So this is just a little bit of institutional knowledge that probably only Miriam and I would remember from fiscal year 14. But when that board met, and we can look in the minutes, there was a discussion about the fact that the one-to-one initiative consisted of purchase of an actual physical capital expenditure, which would fall under ITC, and then the use of that physical item being a curriculum issue. And so what we did was we said that, you know, the actual purchase of the technology makes sense for ITC to oversee it, but the actual evaluation of how it's used is really a curriculum issue. So Miriam and I could talk to you about that, but there was a lengthy discussion about the fact that what actually happens on the computer is a curriculum issue, and evaluating the impact of it and the benefit of it is a curriculum issue, whereas the actual purchase of it and the cost and the procurement and the contract is kind of a ITC issue.
Well, without an evaluation, it's really hard to know whether or not we should continue to invest that money.
Absolutely, which is why...
So the evaluation is kind of an important thing that we asked for.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things that in the complete disintegration and chaos of the school district got lost because evaluation, you know, tends to be one of those things that, like the magnet schools, gets lost. But evaluating the use of technology in the classroom to deliver education, the discussion at the time by that board, and we can go back and look at the minutes, was that it's a curriculum, you know, kind of educational delivery issue.
I didn't ask to evaluate it. I asked for an evaluation of it. That's all. I didn't ask that I do that.
All I'm trying to do is inform the board of something that happened before everybody was here. That's all. That's all I'm trying to do.
Commissioner Chena.
That being said, what would be the plan to achieve that evaluation?
Excuse me, let me just jump in 1 second. Brian, I don't think it's necessary that the plan be in place for any of these goals that we've developed. We're really just trying to get them approved, right, or the knowledge spread, and we're going to go through the approval process next month, at which point then we'll go ahead and try to build the plans from them.
I'm okay with letting the question rest out there
Okay.
in our collective consciousness until it's answered.
It's here. There. Commissioner Seguino, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it just strikes me that this is, I agree with the evaluation has to happen, and it strikes me this is more of a curriculum committee goal to monitor rather than ITC.
Can I ask that the, I'm just going to answer that one. Can I, and you be right at, can I ask that the, David, if you don't mind just getting together with Kyle to see, even if this is one of your goals, that there be an evaluation done, that his team work with you to have that, to make sure that it's planned for and conducted correctly to answer your need.
Sure.
That be okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Harrington.
Oh, well, this conversation was just confusing me a little bit because I just assumed that if the ITC committee goal says assess impact utilizing tools provided via that initiative, that assessment is actually done by ITC. And I think actually whether or not the 2 years ago board thought that work was properly done in the curriculum committee, I think we could make an argument that it's also usefully situated in the ITC. I think when technology people don't have a good sense of what's going on the curricular side, bad technology decisions get made. So I think, however, 2 years ago, board decided to do it, we could decide to apportion that work a little bit differently.
Anyone else? Okay. Commissioner Kirk, anything else?
No, I think we're all set.
Thank you very much.
you.
I appreciate that. We have one further, Dr. Smith.
Just an update that's relevant to this topic. We do have an offer, actually a cash offer on the Murray Street property at a very respectable price, actually in excess of the price that we thought we had a deal on previously. So we keep our fingers crossed that there aren't, and it was a clean offer. There were really no contingencies attached to it of note. Now, something, again, may come up when they do the inspection, they come back and raise questions and so forth, but right now it's somebody who's prepared and able and willing to purchase the building essentially as is.
Commissioner Sheehan?
When you say a cash offer, what does that mean? Like they're
They don't
giving
need
you a
financing.
suitcase of cash?
They don't need financing.
They don't need financing, that's all it means.
Okay.
Then, no, it's just that. Commissioner Curry?
Do you have any knowledge if it's someone who intends to occupy the building or rent it out?
Do we know that, Nathan?
The indication was that the bidder intended to occupy the building.
I didn't hear that.
He wants to occupy the building.
Moving on, let's close out I'm sorry.
You might think that I have an agenda, but kindergarten pairs, the house sold? Or is that money going elsewhere?
We certainly can have the discussion afterwards, but really it's just a matter of this was just brought up as part of his,
I know. I'm just being a nudge. Okay.
which you can be, that's true, okay. I can be too, so that's right. Thank you very much. Closing out the ITC committee, moving on to the Finance Committee. Who will be doing that tonight? Commissioner Seguino.
Shall I go to the goals first and then deal with the motions later?
It's your time, please do it.
Okay. A couple of the things from the Finance Committee meeting are motions that we're going to be voting on, so I'll leave those. And I'm going to ask Brian, who was at the meeting, to also jump in if I miss anything. But with regard to the Finance Committee goals, there are 4. Ensure that the FY16 budget remains balanced and appropriate spending controls are implemented. Number 2 is to facilitate the development of a balanced budget for FY17 upon appropriately researched spending recommendations within total spending parameters provided by the Board of Education. Number 3 is to continue developing fiscal management policies and procedures in accordance with best practice, applicable regulations, and auditor recommendations. Number 4 is continue addressing items listed in the audit management. The Finance Committee requested the interim superintendent add to his fiscal goals an explicit mention of the need for transparency and communication. And finally, a final goal that was suggested by the committee, I think that is more going to be pursued in the future, is to develop a multi-year financial plan that may include elements of outcome-based budgeting. And this really speaks to the importance of the board being able to monitor the effectiveness of the budget in terms of meeting our educational goals for the school district. And right now, we really do not have a set of indicators that helps us do this, so we get caught up in discussions about specific line items. But, arguably, a better approach for us is to identify what some goals of the budget are and to be able to monitor at the end of the year whether we've actually reached those goals or not. So this is considered a more aspirational goal. There's a lot on the plate of the school district. So given current resource limitations of the administration, it may be more feasible to focus on this in FY17, but I think it bears mentioning now for us to think about and to have discussions as appropriate and when ideas emerge so that we actually might move to a model that really allows us as a board to really better evaluate the impact of the budgets that we're voting on.
And in response to that request about transparency, I had drafted another goal that you can continue to wordsmith, but to try to capture a little bit, and that is communicate financial information in a transparent manner using accessible language and formats. Using accessible language and formats. And I think the broad characterization, by the way, which is important to hang on to relative to financial goals, is the way I would characterize it is I think there's another year of sort of housekeeping work, financial housekeeping work that needs to be done, and it's important not to overburden that department until the house is completely in order, and then you can get to what Nathan will be the one to tell you is the fun stuff. He does this stuff like, as a hobby. So he's very much looking forward to getting to the point where he can play with some of these other kinds of issues and be done with some of the cleanup stuff. I characterize that accurately, Nathan?
Yes, I haven't had much time for my hobbies lately.
Thank you. Any discussion on the finance goals?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, one thing we did with the Finance Committee and the ITC Committee is we had a discussion about possibly combining the ITC with Finance, as most of the things that ITC deals with are money-based financial issues. And some of them have something to do with curriculum as well, which was another part of that discussion that hasn't happened yet. So the ITC seems to overlap a couple of committees, and it seems to be that when we only have committees of 3, we don't get a fair I don't feel we get a fair representation of the board. So combining these committees and making them possibly a little larger so that we could get more of a cross-section of the whole board made sense to explore. So we have started that exploration. Unfortunately, we've only had one meeting and we don't really know where we're going. So we're working on it. It's a work in progress.
Commissioner Chino.
Could I just supplement this? Were you going to supplement that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that part of the discussion also was to start exploring collaboration between committees before actually merging them. So the Diversity and Equity Committee lists some goals that involve collaboration with curriculum. So there was talk of a similar approach where ITC and Finance might explore common goals. And then in that process, it may lead to merging committees, or it may just lead to some joint committee meetings that happen every year so that there's coordination between the work of those committees. I don't know if that's what you were going to say.
So the September meeting of the Finance Committee and the ITC Committee are now going to be scheduled on the same night, and a portion of those committees is going to happen jointly. So that's sort of a step in kind of seeing how the overlap works.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Serino?
On the motions?
Yes, please go right. Move on to your next pieces.
So the first motion is to approve McNeil, Letty, and Sheehan as school attorney effective July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016.
18.
Second the motion.
What did I say?
Discussion.
Sorry, 2018.
Thank you. Do I have discussion?
Do you want to discuss it, Brian? I'll just say a few words.
I can say something.
Go ahead,
Let me
please.
do you want to say something? So it is within policy that every 3 years the Finance Committee has to do this. They have to go out there and go through this process. I am absolutely positive that I trust the Finance Committee to have come to the right decision, because I certainly know the Finance Committee would have chosen otherwise if if they felt there was a need to. They feel very confident in this decision. I'm with them behind it. I wouldn't question them on this anyways, to tell you the truth. This is the committee will in this manner. So I personally support this, and I thank the Finance Committee for going through the whole process that was needed for this. Anyone else? Anybody? Oh, come on, somebody's got to disagree with me. Nobody? All right. All those in, I'm sorry, let me back on that. We have the motion to approve McNeil, Letty, and Sheehan, PC, as school attorney effective July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2018. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? It's unanimous.
I will if you want me.
Go ahead.
Just give me one quick second, I'm sorry, just one second. Commissioner Chena,
So on behalf of the Finance Committee, I'd like to make a motion
certainly.
to authorize the expenditure of up to $80,000 for contracted services supporting the development of a long-range facilities master plan contingent upon cost sharing with the City of Burlington and Burlington Electric Department.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Seguino, and discussion. Commissioner Kurt.
I just want to speak to the motion because the motion was actually vetted through the ITC. This is the long-range goals on the facilities and the long-range goals on how we're going to continue to finance repairs and needs of the district as our aging infrastructure crumbles, or hopefully not. So I would hope that everybody would support this. The City of Burlington has given some money towards it. And the district is going to have to spend some money as well.
Commissioner Dotson.
Just quickly, the motion asks for an authorization up to $80,000, then talks about cost sharing with the city. So that would be $80,000 of district dollars, and then whatever other monies that the city, or would the cities be part of $80,000?
80,000 offset by the contribution of the city and BED, which would, is estimated to be in the range of 30 to 40,000.
Which would make the 80,000 number smaller.
Correct.
That's my question. Thank you.
Further discussion, please. No one. Thank you. We have a motion to authorize, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner
So
Chena.
it's a question. I don't know who has the best answer. I'm thinking Howard might. But this motion might seem vague to people in the community who wonder what we're talking about or what this is. And I'm wondering if someone with more expertise than myself could give like a 1-minute explanation and then let the public know where they can find information, detailed information about this proposal.
Dr. Smith?
The tackling the goal of long-range planning is something that we've been working on for the second half of the year. In the process of doing that, when we began to also engage with the city and get a sense of the work that they had done in this area, and it became clear, the city realized this in their own work, that they had to actually hire somebody to oversee this. It's not something that you generally have the resident expertise within your own organization to do properly. And so as we were putting together a planning model, we realized we were in the same boat, that if we were going to really go through a thorough process that isn't just a conventional, almost sort of, if you will, fox guarding the chicken coop kind of thing, where it's just educators sit around the table saying, we need this and we need that, as opposed to broadening the scope of the work and engaging resource people who go beyond the conventional school thinking and ask other kinds of questions in terms of alternative sources of financing, collaborative partnerships with other organizations and so forth, and are in a position with the skill set and the network to actually explore those and bring back recommendations that would inform the resulting plan. So as we went through this, realized that we need this resource, we put out RFPs, we got proposals, we evaluated the proposals and came up with 2 proposals that are complementary, that with the combination of skill sets and expertise that we think will result in generating a high quality plan, which is, and the ultimate sort of the goal, or the way it's been phrased, or the deliverable, I should say, is a publicly vetted master plan that to present to the board for board adoption, so that the responsibility lies with going through all of the legwork necessary to get to the point where the board will feel comfortable that we've been through a thorough process that's also thoroughly publicly vetted and puts the board in a position to feel comfortable acting on that and putting yourselves in a position of actually being able to adopt a master plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Judson.
So I think what I heard Brian saying was, what's an elevator speech that we could give as individuals to people who say, are you kidding? Another $80,000? So my question would be, I'd like to be able to answer this question. So how much might $80,000 save the district over time on infrastructure issues? If we spend this 80,000, we might save, I mean, who knows, but.
We're talking about expenses that, would easily extend approaching $100 million.
Right.
In terms of the total needs of the district over some period of time, a combination of expansion and renovation and repair, rehabilitation. So if you look at it as a fraction of, of that magnitude of spending, you want to make sure that if you're going to contemplate looking at ultimately committing that kind of funding, that this becomes a relatively small investment in ensuring that it's informed by a plan that is more sophisticated than a plan that the district could develop with its own resources.
So it's a little bit like hiring an architect before you start building. If you don't hire that architect, it might cost you more money.
Ultimately, yeah, you would make assumptions that were uninformed, and then you'd find out, oh, we couldn't do it that way, and you might have wasted a lot of time and money.
Right. So again, if somebody comes up to me and says, okay, why are you spending this 80,000? I can explain it that way, but I think what if they're asking, how much do you think it might save?
It would be entirely speculative
Okay,
to say.
yeah.
I don't think we could give a number that we could defend, as a specific number. I can say that in general, this type of service, the general pitch is that they will save more than the cost of the service.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it's pretty safe to say that's sort of baked into the assumption. Also, I think it's important, we've used 80,000 to make sure we're transparent, that that's the total amount of money being spent. That's not the total amount of money the district will end up spending net terms. And the other answer I would give is to thank the city and BED for stepping up and offering to share in the cost of this.
Just one second, Commissioner Curry.
So I would suggest that we can tell the voters that in fat budget times and in lean budget times, we have not been able to harness the resources in the district budget to get this long-range facility needs plan quantified. So this will quantify our needs over time, and it's a one-time opportunity because we have the partnership of the city and BED. And number two, the second part of this will bring us recommendations for how to leverage non-taxpayer dollars to pay for our facility asset management needs. So the second part of this is there's two different consultants. One is going to develop the long-range plan, and the other is going to look into innovative, alternative ways of financing and funding our long-term asset management needs. And so we'll leverage this one-time opportunity to get those recommendations.
Thank you. One more thing, Commissioner Kirk.
And just to piggyback on what Liz says is correct, if we don't get the expertise to clarify all of the data that we get, then all the data we get is almost useless and we'll be right where we are today. This is money that we need to be spent so that we can have a clear-cut, long-range goal. That's why we're actually hiring people with expertise to do this job.
Thank you.
Just so it's clear.
I'm going to go ahead and call this. So Brian, if you have something significant that's going to change, please go right ahead.
I just want to say a closing thing.
Okay.
The person who made the motion, if that's okay.
Right ahead.
So I just would like to request that we could be provided with something to help explain this to people, like a short explanation, not asking people to do a lot of work, just in the spirit of transparency. If we had something that's public, that's posted, a brief outline. Thank you.
The Finance Committee can create something like that and pass it out to us.
Yeah, I was kind of asking Howard, hoping he could quickly crank it out, but because he knows it better than us. But that's all. That's my request. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
45 seconds.
So I have a motion to authorize the expenditure of up to $80,000 for contracted services, supporting the development of a long-range facilities master plan, contingent upon cost sharing with the City of Burlington and Burlington Electric Department. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Unanimous. How are we doing this? So many unanimous. Never happens. I'm just going to, I know we're about to go elsewhere. I just want to, I brag about you guys all the time in the media. If you ever watch me on the media or anything like that, you hear me talking about you. And I got to tell you, out of the chaos of the retreat came what I think are some goals that are just really phenomenal. I mean, I'm reading these things from I'm almost a bystander on these because I didn't have anything to do with any of them. So I get to sit back and I got to read these things, and I'm looking at them saying, is it achievable? Yes. Is it achievable within a year? Yes. Is it measurable during that time? Yes. So I just want to thank everybody for taking the time, really, and putting these things together, because I think that they're just such a great step in the right direction. Commissioner Seguino.
I'm thinking of the next step, and I wonder, Commissioner Porter, if you could describe to us then the next step in the process of accepting the board goals.
So I asked that, you can certainly chew on some things, and you can, if you have any further suggestions for any of the committees, please just send them an email so they can talk about it. They certainly would review any of these suggested changes during the September committee meetings, or any that occur between now and the next one. And the goal being that we have everything all cleared up and we feel comfortable coming to the September board meeting with a single approval over all committee goals as those that the board wants to adhere to. So we're going to take the committee goals, we're going to make them the board goals, so we all own these things and we're all responsible for them. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay. One final piece, moving on to Section 12, we have a motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations, the premature disclosure of which would put the district at a substantial advantage.
Point of order. We can't entertain a motion to go into executive session without first going on record that we have a reason to go into executive session.
Could we get this cleared up once and for all?
Yes.
Because this has been, and we happen to have an attorney here. Could I ask?
All right, I withdraw my comment.
But while Joe is here, could we get some clarification? Because we thought we had this fixed, and if we don't, we'd like to get it.
As I heard the suggestion for going into executive session, it meets the requirements of the statute. It is for contractual negotiations, and it indicates that premature disclosure of the subject of the meeting will put the district at a substantial disadvantage. Those are the two statutory criteria for going in for contract negotiations. So with a positive vote, you have acted appropriately.
Thank you.
I'd like to second that motion. Mark did, didn't he?
I did not.
Well, then I'd like to make the motion.
First is Chyna. Second? Commissioner Curry. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against?